Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Good evening and happy Friday to everybody out there. Hope you had a wonderful week. Tonight, I'm very, very honored to welcome this guest that we've had in the past. Only one time, but it was several years ago, and it's been a long, long time since we welcomed this guest. It is Luke Easterling. You could follow Luke from his work at Luke Easterling in one word in X. He is also a writer for the Athlon Sports, as you can see there. Luke, good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. How are you?
Yeah, glad to finally do it again, Stephen. It's been too long, buddy.
It has been, yes, sir. But thank you very much. And Luke, before we get to the main topic of our conversation, which is the NFL offseason overall and the looking into the NFL draft next month, I wanted to kind of touch bases with you on the two of the sports media topic that kind of dominated the headline yesterday and today. We're going to start with the one that was a hot button topic yesterday when the Department of Defense tried to, erase Jackie Robinson's name from the Department of Defense, considering, he served in the military during World War II. And also the historical aspect of his accomplishments, as well as in the military as well. This was actually brought on by Jeff Passan of ESPN, baseball writer, and he even asked questions with the DoD. Their response to this matter was nothing short of insulting. Filled with vile stuff about the DEI and all that stuff that people get so upset about these days. And you also kind of responded onto your post, which I will post it in a moment. But Luke, give me your thoughts on this whole fiasco and where you pointed out about Mina Kimes of ESPN posting about it. What made you decide to kind of give your side of the story, and how do you feel about the whole, I guess we could call it the nonsense of trying to erase away the accomplishment or even the existence of black people like Jackie Robinson?
Yeah, I think nonsense is probably the nicest way we could put it, right? We could get a lot more colorful and probably a little more accurate with what this situation has become. But
exactly,
I think there are two sides of it. There's when I engage in those conversations, there's a part of me that's like, hey, does this conversation need, another opinion from somebody who looks like me and doesn't necessarily have, the same perspective to speak on as people who have been impacted by these things in different ways. So I do weigh that before I get involved, but I always want to amplify the voices of the people who know a lot more about this stuff than I do, because there's a lot of people like that. And I always want to defer to the people who know more about it than I do. But there's, this is so obviously atrocious to me, right, that it's just, on every level. And, the conversation has kind of taken on a different, tenor over the last couple of days with, we're back to the whole stick to sports thing, and people go to sports to escape these things. And I think, and again, a lot of people like Mina and others have said it much more eloquently, but to pretend that Jackie Robinson's place in history can be completely separated from what people would call politics, even though, you can argue that those things aren't just political, they're about, right, humanity and human rights and those things. And so, to pretend that we can talk about Jackie Robinson as just this great baseball player, as if his significance in our country's history is not absolutely rooted in being prevented, in an entire race of people being prevented from participating in the sport up until that point, and act like that's not going to be part of the conversation, or to act like the Dan Le Batard show can't talk about that. And it's just silly. It's silly to me to consider that and to act like that's not a part of it. We see people on Twitter all day long talking about, we can talk about him as a great baseball player, but what does it have to do with it? It has to do with it because it was it was something that people weren't allowed to do until he was brave enough to do it. And so exactly, if you're going to try to keep that part of it out of the conversation, I don't I don't understand what the I don't know how to say it. I don't understand how you could view that situation as like, oh, we can talk about him as a baseball player, but not as an American hero in this way. And I don't know how you arrive at that opinion. I just don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. For his accomplishment of becoming the first, African American to break the color barrier alone itself is, as of significance. And yet, you wanted to try and discredit his accomplishment, which is somewhat become more prevalent and easier to do now in this day and age, in the world that we live in, especially in this country right now. There was a article I think pointed out by Awful Announcing about Robert Griffin III trying to play both sides of it, and got spectacularly got owned. if you know what I'm talking about. To me, I just find it that sports is not political. It's always been political. We could go back all the way to the 1936 Olympics when Nazis try to use that as a propaganda, and then the Black Lives Matter also. Colin Kaepernick getting screwed by the league and having to settle out of court. And then you could also bring up about the other examples, just to name a few. What do you think of people like Robert Griffin III, who is trying to tailor to both sides and just try and pretend like sports shouldn't be political, but when in fact it's always been political?
Yeah, and I think this is something. It's not the first time this has come up, right? I think the idea that you can separate. And again, I talked about it earlier. That yes, sports is escapism to a certain extent,
right?
But it's a game played by human beings, and they play it within the societies and within the world that we live in. And so to pretend like those things don't overlap on a constant basis in a million different ways. And I think what frustrates me sometimes with this conversation is, some people are really okay with sports being political in certain ways that they don't consider to be political or that they're comfortable with. And then when it comes time for something that they disagree with or something that bothers them, it's like, now I want you to stick to sports because it doesn't reflect.
If they don't agree with your, or if they're not on their side, then they start attacking those people.
Yeah, and I think a prime example of this is, if you go back to the comments that Harrison Butker made in his commencement speech, the Chiefs kicker, and how you saw people on maybe the other side of the political aisle who were celebrating that and like, yeah, this is somebody we, and regardless of what you believe about that subject in particular, it's interesting to see how a lot of people who don't want politics in sports, when it's certain subject matter, when it all of a sudden, the tables are turned and it's something they do support and they do agree with, and now they want to celebrate it and be like, oh, I'm going to go buy his jersey now because he supports this thing that I agree with. You're doing the same thing. You're making it political as well, but now it's okay because it's the politics that you agree with.
Right. The shut up and dribble type of people only want them, for them to be on their side, but when in fact that they don't seem to share with your viewpoints, racist and narrow-minded viewpoints, then they go on the attack and they get extremely insecure and angry about it. So it's kind of a little bit of pathetic in so many ways, with how they weaponize sports when in fact that it's not against the opposition of sorts. So let's move on to the other news that was quite gotten a lot of attraction today. It is 670 The Score, Dan Bernstein, who have been suspended for an entire week this week after he got into a Twitter beef with somebody over the photo of the fishing that he posted. And he got in. So here's the story for those who are not familiar with, especially if you're not from Chicago area. After sharing a photo of a fish he caught he was accused of failing to abide by catch and release rules. The media personality responded by threatening to release the person's address and phone number, even got their kids involved. And so if you know Dan Bernstein, Luke, he's been in some hot waters, a couple of times, referencing, female body parts, as well as the more of a highly contested, verbiage going after somebody from Barstool because somebody referred to him by his last name, even though his show is also using his last name and so forth, which I'm sure you might have heard of it before. As somebody who's obviously highly engaged and involved in Twitter like this yourself, what kind of a lesson do you and others kind of learn from this debacle that obviously somebody like Bernstein got fired for? And is there like a way for somebody like him to learn and recover from this, or is this pretty much unfortunately, like a death sentence for his career?
I mean, I don't know if I can speak to that part of it as much. I can, my rule when it comes to my social media usage is I have never regretted not tweeting something. That's the rule that I play by, and so, have I gotten into it with trolls before about certain things and probably, let it go on one tweet too many, maybe just even for my own mental health. Of course I have, who hasn't, but I think there are clear and obvious lines that you draw, when you start talking about, publicizing people's private information. And obviously when you're making, I don't know all the details of those other situations that happened in his past. So I don't know how much I can speak to his direct situation, but I just think it's almost, in real life, it's similar to this as well. Like when you are in a heated situation, taking a deep breath and stepping away for 5 or 10 minutes can be very, very useful and very helpful. And so, it's not, again, most of even the most heated conversations I've gotten into on Twitter, I feel like we're mostly sports related. If I'm really passionate about, Levante David getting into the Hall of Fame one day, or if a Saints fan really comes for me as a Bucs fan and wants to, get hot about Michael Thomas's value as a wide receiver versus Mike Evans or something, like I'll go to town for my guys in terms of sports. But like, if there are, I'll say, off the field conversations that happen on social media with regards to sports, I feel like these things have a very clear, if you're paying attention, I think very clear, this is an okay conversation to engage in. This is the right way to do it. And there's clear ways in which that's absolutely wrong. And maybe that's not obvious to everybody. I think it should be. But again, if all of these things, again, I've had like a cursory read over of some of the situations he's ended up in. It definitely, those things do not look good at all. And in this particular situation, somebody had a nasty comment about a fish you caught, like having it escalate from that point to where we are now. At some point, you just have to step away from the computer. You got to step away from your phone. And I think that's healthy in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. But this is what happens when you aren't able to just put it down, to step away, to take a deep breath, because there's always going to be somebody on social media trying to get under your skin for whatever reason. And you always have control of that for yourself. And so if you aren't willing and able to put it down and separate yourself from that, go outside, take a walk, do whatever you need to do to not escalate the situation to the point where you're threatening to dox people. Like I don't know what to tell you, because I feel like there's a really clear line there that should be drawn and should be obvious for everybody, especially somebody who's, in the public eye and is well known and has a reach, has a platform. I feel like you have a responsibility to not behave in that way.
Yeah. If anybody's been following our show for quite some time, I had a bit of a, I've gotten into it myself as well. Unfortunately, that's something that I've kind of, learned and I feel sometimes I've embarrassed myself in more ways than one, and especially for my esteemed co-host Ken Fang from Awful Announcing, certainly. So I understand the side of where Bernstein probably could have at least taken a high road, or at least maybe he could have taken a more proactive, apologies, but certainly because of his past histories, um, with the station where he has been either got called out or have been highly publicized, like even last year when he got into a tiff with somebody from Barstool, which obviously he got a lot of flack for. Maybe at some point, maybe the chances just kept run out, and it probably were maybe in the best interest for both sides to move on. Certainly, Dan certainly has his supporters, but in recent years he's become probably somebody who's kind of like a get out of my yard, not in my backyard type of person, and perhaps maybe become unbearable to some degree, and maybe for somebody like Dan, this was probably his wake up call, and whatever he decides to do, I'm sure he'll have an opportunity to reflect on himself, and perhaps maybe he will speak on this matter wherever he ends up emerging, whether it's with another station, podcast, or maybe his own YouTube channel. Certainly, I don't think Dan is going to keep his mouth shut, and maybe he's going to have a lot to say on this matter about whether his role and how he learned from this mistake moving forward. All right, let's get to the real conversation that we brought you in for. By the way, tonight's guest is Luke Easterling from Athlon Sports. Let's talk about the NFL offseason. So far, the free agency has kind of slowed down significantly. Right now, we're in the teams looking for bargain stages. And, before we came on tonight, the big news just came up about 10 minutes ago. You're certainly familiar with this player very much. Jameis Winston, the former number one overall pick, just signed with the New York Giants for 2 years, about $8 million contract. Give me your thoughts on Jameis Winston's career, and what do you think of him choosing to go to New York Giants? Do you like this move, or do you feel like this is a nothing burger for either side, in your opinion?
I mean, it's, we knew the musical chairs game at quarterback was dwindling for everybody involved, right? There's a few teams and a few players that at some point had to be matched up in whatever direction, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's, Russell Wilson. Jameis was in that bag of kind of like veteran bridge quarterbacks. And when you look at teams like Tennessee, the Giants, Pittsburgh, those teams, Cleveland, we knew those guys had to match up there at some point somewhere. And so for, on Winston's side of things, I think the attractive thing about the Giants is you have Malik Neighbors, obviously one of the best young receivers in the league. You got a defense with some solid pieces. They need more, obviously, but there's some guys there to get excited about on the defensive line in particular. And I think you're going to have a coaching staff that's highly motivated. I think everybody can look at, that management side of things with the Giants, with Joe Shane and Brian Dable, and say, hey, they're lame duck. They're going to get fired after a year anyway. If you're a free agent, you're saying, hey, but yeah, these guys are going to have a sense of urgency as well. I'm going to come here and they're going to have to win games, because otherwise everybody's going to clean house. So I think what it does for the Giants is give them a little bit more freedom. I said in my mock draft earlier this week that any quarterback that signs at this point in the process should not have any impact on whether or not his new team drafts a quarterback very early. So regardless of where Rodgers and Wilson and Jameis and all these guys end up, none of those players are at a point in their career, both, in terms of age, in terms of ability, where the Steelers or the Giants or the Browns or the Titans or any team that signs them should now be like, oh, thank God, now we don't have to think about quarterback early. I don't see that at all. So, it makes sense. Jameis would have made sense to any of those other teams I mentioned. They would have made sense for any of those other quarterbacks I mentioned. Jameis landing with the Giants, there's some pieces there I think that makes sense, and Malik Neighbors would be tops on that list. But again, free agency, especially at this point in the process, is about raising the floor of your roster at whatever position, right? You're trying to really fix your depth to the point where you can go into the draft and say, hey, I'm not forced to take a quarterback at 3. I'm not forced to take a quarterback earlier than I want to and reach there instead of taking a much better prospect at a different position. And so I think, Winston gives you that chance. If the Giants are at 3 and Cam Ward goes number 1 and you feel like, man, do I have to take Shedeur Sanders at 3? If he goes 2 and you're sitting there at 3, you'd be like, oh, now I can't take either of those 2 quarterbacks. But now you can take Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter and know that, okay, we've got Jameis. Maybe we take Jalen Milroe later. We take Jackson Dart, somebody more developmental. And again, it raises the floor of the position. Obviously, you know what you're getting. You're getting a guy that's, known for turning the ball over quite a bit in his career.
Right.
And so there's a reason he's still available at this point in the process. But it's, for a team that only had 1 quarterback on the roster, signing him and again, at that amount of money, it made sense.
Mm-hmm. If the Giants are still picking at number 3 and Shedeur Sanders is still available, that's where he would go there, right?
I think he's the big question mark. I think he's the big wild card here. And my question then is, if he should go 3, why shouldn't he go 2? That's my question for Cleveland. If all 3 of those teams need a starting quarterback. So
my apologies there. Yeah.
If you're talking about, no, I think, because Kuiper had him at 3, Daniel Jeremiah had him at 3 last week. So I mean, it's a completely valid conversation to have. But that's why, and again, in my mock draft on Thursday, I had him at 2. Not because obviously he's the second best player in this draft, but if you're, again, this is a bigger picture idea, a kind of philosophy that I have about the draft, which is if you would take a quarterback at 20, you have to take him at 2. It's too important of a position. So if you think a quarterback is worthy of a first round selection, the impact that position has on your success is so significant that you have to take that guy wherever you're picking. And if, sure, you can take a chance, take, whoever at 2 and then trade up, if he starts to fall. But if you're convinced that a quarterback is worthy of your first round pick, I don't care if it's 1 or 32, you have to pick him wherever you are if he's on the board, because it's just that important. Because Cleveland is a prime example. They've had Myles Garrett for a while now. They had Joe Thomas for a decade. It did not make a damn bit of difference. Those are 2 of the most elite players to ever play those positions. And those are premium positions, left tackle and pass rusher. Those are 2 very, very premium positions. And those guys did not matter at all because they never figured out the quarterback position. And so that's my philosophy when it comes to, he's a late first round grade, so he shouldn't go number 2. If you're convinced that a quarterback is worth a first round pick, he's worth all of them. He's worth any of those first round picks wherever you're picking, because that guy, if you hit, even if he's above average, and the reason I'll say that is because look at how much average starting quarterbacks are getting paid now. It costs upwards of $30+ million a year just for a quarterback who can get the job done in any sense of the word. The most mediocre starting quarterbacks in the league are making a lot of money. And so when that's the case, it always translates to the draft. And I think that's why, you'll have years like the Kenny Pickett year where I feel like the league kind of reset the pendulum back the other way. And outside of Kenny Pickett, the league was like, no, we're not doing this again. We're not overdrafting all these quarterbacks. Pickett went 20 and then nobody came off the board till the 3rd round. And so there are classes like that where that happens, but I don't think that class is anywhere near as good as this class. So that's where I think the conversation is fun. I think we can still debate whether Cam Ward should go number 1, although I think the closer we get to the draft, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But when you have 2 quarterbacks like those 2 guys, and Shedeur Sanders, I think, is a little bit behind him, but still a very, very talented quarterback. He reminds me a lot of Geno Smith. I think as a quarterback, I think that's a lot of the way he'll win, is a similar skill set. But it's about the fact that I think there's 3 elite players in this draft, and I think it's Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and Ashton Genty. But do you take one of those elite players at those positions, knowing full well that unless you have a quarterback in place, you're going to have a Hall of Fame player and maybe go 6-11 every season until you figure out the quarterback spot?
Mm-hmm. Well, your mock draft has Tennessee taking Cam Ward at number 1. If Cam Ward does go to number 1, what kind of a quarterback is Tennessee getting in him?
I think they're getting a really fun player, man. I think this is a guy, again, no FBS offers coming out of high school, 0-star recruit, went to Incarnate Word and put up video game numbers that made everybody, if you're paying attention to what's happening at Incarnate Word, somebody's doing something crazy, right? And that's what he did. He put up ridiculous numbers. So then he transfers to Washington State, And Washington State's still in the Pac-12 at this point, and everybody's like, okay, well, let's see what he does against Power 5, competition. He did it again. Obviously the numbers weren't quite that big, but he was successful, put up good numbers. And then he declares for the draft for like 5 minutes and then changes his mind. He ends up going to Miami. And Miami, he's highly productive again in a Power 5 conference again, puts up big numbers. And I think really grew as a passer. Still has those moments where you're like, what did you see there? I think I wrote in the Athlon draft guide this year on my scouting report for him that his mind writes checks that his arm can't cash at times, where he's just like, I can get it in there. I can fit it in there. And to be fair, Josh Allen does that, and Mahomes does that at times. And so if you're going to have a special quarterback who has that playmaker kind of gunslinger mentality, you're going to have to live with a few turnovers because they're going to make bold decisions. They're going to make really arrogant throws sometimes, but you're going to have to live with that if you want the other side of the pendulum swinging back to those big plays, those rare highlight reel. Oh my God, I can't believe he made those types of plays. And Cam Ward is that guy. He makes those types of plays. He's a great athlete. He can extend plays. He can run when you need him to. He's not Jalen Milroe in terms of the, elite speed and explosiveness and big play runner. But I just feel like what separates him from Shedeur Sanders is the high-end arm strength, the ability to make those crazy plays outside of structure. Sanders can do that to an extent, but he's not that kind of athlete, doesn't have that kind of arm strength. Very accurate quarterback Shedeur Sanders is. Very good decision maker. And I think really what separates Shedeur Sanders from a lot of people is he's not going to be fazed by pressure of any kind on the field or off. His offensive line was awful his first year in Colorado, and he still, mentally was locked in and still played, as well as you could expect. And he's also grown up as the son of Deion Sanders with the spotlight on him the whole time. Everybody, a lot of people, rooting for him to fail and waiting for him to slip up and make a mistake. That type of mental makeup for your quarterback, that ability to be unfazed by whatever's happening off the field, whatever's happening in the play on the field, that I think is why I would feel most excited about Shedeur Sanders as my quarterback, because I know if we're a bad team and we're going to take a little while, if we're going to have to build up the offensive line, if he's not going to have an ideal surrounding, he has done all of those things and found success, and he knows how to handle all the other stuff that comes with being the face of a franchise. And I think those are the things that would really separate Shedeur Sanders as a potential franchise quarterback.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Luke Easterling from Athlon Sports, joining us tonight to talk about the NFL offseason as well as the upcoming NFL draft. Okay, so your draft has, Travis Hunter at number 3 to the Giants. Number 4, Abdul Carter to the New England Patriots. We know Carter has had some injury. Was it the stress fracture?
Yeah, I think stress fracture in the foot, and then he was coming off that shoulder injury, which even with one arm, he was unblockable in the college football playoffs. So
no concern whatsoever with his injuries.
No concern whatsoever probably isn't the right way to put it, but those aren't injuries that make me worried. This is a big part of the process that's tough too, because the teams will have access to medical records that we don't in the media. And so, if a team flags something on because their MRIs and their doctors see something that we're not necessarily going to know until after the draft, that's one thing. But if you're just asking me, those injuries aren't injuries. It's not like somebody's coming off a torn Achilles late in the season, not somebody coming off of, a major serious multi-ligament knee injury halfway through the year. That's not what we're dealing with here. So those injuries don't concern me as much. And until we have any information to the contrary, I can only work with what I've seen on the field. And this guy's just an absolute game wrecker. Again, he's one of the few really elite prospects in this class, regardless of position. And so if I'm New England, if I'm Mike Vrabel, and he is on that board at 4, man, I'm running a 4.340 up to the podium to get that.
And you have Mason Graham at 5. I know the people have been kind of down on Graham recently because of his measurables. Where are you with Mason Graham? Is number 5 probably the highest that he might go, or do you feel like he could probably drop all the way to 8 or 10 in that area as well?
Yeah, I think his range is pretty wide. I think 5 is definitely the ceiling. I think, it wouldn't be crazy if he went 10, 11, Chicago, San Francisco, that range. I don't think that's crazy either. But the reason why I just can't get off putting him at 5 is because he's just such a great fit for what Jacksonville needs. They've got great pair of edge rushers in Walker and Hines Allen. I like Mason Smith's upside a bit as an interior guy, but Mason Graham is a versatile guy. I had Booger McFarland on my podcast this week, and he talked about how he can play the nose if you have a 3-tech, or he can play the 3-tech if you have a nose. And so he really lets you do a lot of versatile things with your defensive front. And for anybody that's concerned about the measurables, please just go watch him play football. Just go watch Mason Graham, the football player. Go watch him play against Ohio State, against a talented offensive line. Go watch him take over games, not just as a run stopper, but with the explosiveness, the agility to be able to get into the backfield and to push the pocket. Speaking as a former quarterback and talking to a lot of quarterbacks I know, everybody puts this focus on these flashy edge rushers. As a quarterback, I am way more annoyed and way more frustrated and flustered by interior pressure than I am edge pressure, because edge pressure allows me to step up into the pocket if I have a clean, interior. Yeah. Instant interior pressure forces me to bail. It forces me out of my structure and into an edge rusher who might have been otherwise blocked, or forces me to abandon the play structure earlier than I want to. So guys like Mason Graham are so valuable in that they can do everything at such a high level. And again, if you're worried that his arms are an inch too short or he was too light at the combine, please go watch him play football and realize that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the Ashton Jeanty. You have the Bears at 10, which as a Bears fan, I don't know how to react to that one, but we'll get to that in a moment. Because there's a strong chance that maybe the Raiders could be linked to Jeanty at number 6, which is understandable because Pete Carroll, probably given his advanced age, doesn't want to sit around and wait for a rookie quarterback to develop, especially in this year's draft class. That's why they acquired Geno Smith from his former team, Seattle. There's the comfort and understandability there. Maybe he sees Jeanty as his Marshawn Lynch to a degree. Do you buy that maybe the Raiders could draft Jeanty at number 6, or do you think it's just a smokescreen?
I mean, I definitely think it's possible. Again, he's one of the 3 truly elite players in this draft, regardless of position, which I said earlier. But I think the interesting thing, and I say this kind of in that explanation there in the mock, is the underrated aspect of this conversation is they just hired Chip Kelly, who was the OC at Ohio State last year, and he had 2 running backs in that offense that were pretty damn good and are both going to be available in this draft. And so if Chip Kelly has anything to say about it, obviously I don't think he would mind working with Ashton Jeanty, but if you're telling me as a Raiders, organization, if I could spend the number 6 overall pick on a running back, or I could get Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins in the 2nd round on day 2, giving Chip Kelly and a running back that he's already worked with, that he's already been productive with, and both of those running backs are fantastic, and 3 down backs that can do everything. They can catch the ball out of the backfield. They can win with speed. They can win with power. They can pass protect. They can do all those things. If I don't have to spend a top 6 pick on a running back, I'm pretty happy about it. Now, Ashton Jeanty is a special player. He is still by far the best running back in this class, and he's worthy of consideration in that place. But I just wonder if Pete Carroll, again, as a defensively minded head coach, if he wouldn't rather go with a defensive player. I wonder how much Tom Brady's influence is gonna be on that decision. John Spytek, their new general manager, obviously I'm a big fan of his after his time in Tampa and helping build them into a consistent contender. But I have Will Johnson going there, and I know Will Johnson's slipped a little bit, and he's in the mid-first round for a lot of people. I love him as a player, it seems, more than a lot of people. I think people are overthinking him way too much because he was banged up last season. But when he's at full strength, he is, 6'2", 200 pounds, all long arms, everything you want a shutdown corner to be, and the guy you would draft in the top 10. I think he's such a great fit for Pete Carroll's defense, the style of corner he likes. And again, John Spytek and Tom Brady, both diehard Michigan alums. And you're telling me their first draft pick as an organization with those 2 guys in a power structure could be a Michigan guy. I wouldn't be surprised at that at all.
Mm-hmm. And then moving down, Ahmad Membo to the Jets, Jalen Walker to the Panthers at 8. Now, here's a guy that's another interesting draft prospect that the Bears fans are kind of, scratching their head right now. Shamar Stewart, who had a phenomenal number at the NFL Combine, where I happen to be in attendance there too. Give me your thoughts on Shamar Stewart and his lack of production at Texas A&M. Is that on him, or do you also put that on the system, the scheme that the Texas A&M was running? I believe when he got there first, Jimbo Fisher was still there, but then his last season, Tim Elko came over from Duke to become the new Texas A&M head coach there. What do you make of Stewart as a player and a future player in the NFL?
Yeah, he's definitely one of those intriguing guys, the very boomer bust. How do you measure elite, rare athleticism with the fact that he had 3.5 sacks in his entire career? I mean, that's a big number. And so you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, hey, I need a guy who proved he can produce and I can't bank on the athleticism. Or you're going to say, hey, I trust my defensive line coach to get the most out of this guy who, I've said it before, there are only so many human beings walking the earth who are as big and athletic as Shamar Stewart is. Like, there's just, those people are rare. It's just rare to find a guy. And so when you look at the film, he creates a lot of chaos in the backfield. Like, he just can't finish. Like, he just cannot finish at the quarterback. He can pressure, he can blow up running plays and force running backs elsewhere. He's clearly just somebody who has physical gifts that are off the charts and just doesn't really know how to use them yet. He's still figuring that out. And we've seen those types of players in the draft before. So what I would caution people who just want to write him off and say, oh, he's just, a workout wonder and he didn't produce in college. A couple things about that. He reminds me so much of Trayvon Walker when he was coming out of Georgia. And if you remember, Trayvon Walker made a very late push up the board all the way up to number 1. He ended up going number 1 overall, despite not having a ton of production, despite being a very workout warrior type of player who was just a rare athlete, who was versatile. Georgia moved him, inside, outside. And so what has he become in Jacksonville? He's developed into a productive pass rusher who can make really crazy plays with that athleticism. And so, he's turned into a double-digit sack guy because, again, you don't just get to the NFL and stay the player you are. It's on the team and the coaches and your supporting cast to kind of develop you. And when you have those physical traits, if I was any defensive line coach in the NFL, I'd be begging to get this guy in my room because that's my job. My job is to earn my money and turn this guy into a special player because he has special traits. And so for people who say you can't be, unproductive at the college level and go into the NFL and make a difference, I'll remind them that Josh Allen threw for 1,800 yards his last year at Wyoming. He threw 16 touchdown passes. Okay. Yeah. Alvin Kamara was the 3rd leading rusher at Tennessee the last year he was in college. And so, I'll always remind people that what a player did in college is not what he is necessarily capable of doing at the next level. And so you can pull out anecdotal examples to prove whatever side of that debate you're on, whether you think you have to be productive or you think you just have to, bake on the traits. But there's a path, there's a plan there, and it's Trayvon Walker. You get him in the building, you get him a quality defensive line coach that can improve his technique, develop those traits into a productive player. And there's proof that you can go from not very productive in college to a superstar player in the NFL, just like there's a million players who put up huge numbers at the college level and never did a damn thing in the NFL. So there's definitely some boom or bust there, but every defensive line coach wants a player like that in his room.
Mm-hmm. Without question. Will Campbell is another very popular player and also a polarizing prospect that's been linked to the Chicago Bears at number 10.
Right.
Provided that Ashton Jeanty is gone to, like we were saying, Las Vegas Raiders. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Will Campbell's potential and his, weakness of lack of ideal arm length? That's like 32.5 inches, I believe. Is he a strictly guard, or do you feel like he does have a potential to play left tackle, not this year, but maybe in 2026 or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a player who played left tackle at a really high level in the best conference in football. And so, if you're going to tell me that because he has 32.5-inch arms, he can't do that, I'm just not that type of scout. I'm not that type of guy. The NFL, is there a correlation between arm length and successful starters to a point? But do we also have examples of guys with shorter arms who are just really good football players still being able to stay at tackle and be effective? Yes, we do. So, to me,
Joe Thomas, right? Joe Thomas is the one.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the
I'm not
tape,
trying to compare Joe Thomas and
right. No, but that's what I mean. Like it's
Okay.
clearly possible to be efficient and effective without the arm length if you have all the other things. It's just like everything, it's like a 40-yard dash. Do you want everybody to be fast? Sure. But if you're not,
Absolutely.
and you're really good at everything else, does it matter as much? Bucky Irving ran a 4.55 last year. I don't think anybody gave a damn when he was running past everybody last season in Tampa Bay, and nobody cared. So with Will Campbell, if you go to the tape, you see a guy who played at a really high level at left tackle for quite a while. I mean, he's pretty young. I think he's just turned 21 or will barely be 21 at the draft. So you got a guy who's still got a very high ceiling and a lot of development ahead of him. And so the right team won't be scared away by the arm length if they want him to stay at left tackle. And if you're talking about a team like Chicago, that's where I would want him. I would only take him at 10 if I really think he can play left tackle, just because I think you can get a high quality guard with either of those two early seconds. And I think if they want to take a luxury pick in an Ashton Jeanty, picking Ashton Jeanty at 10 and mocking him there in that projection is more me telling the Bears they did a hell of a job in free agency and with trades addressing their biggest needs, bringing in Grady Jarrett, bringing in Drew Dahlman, trading for Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. They have elevated the floor of those need positions to the point where they're free to take that guy if they want to, because there's really no immediate, oh my God, if we don't spend number 10 on this position, we're screwed. They've done a great job of not putting themselves in that position. So unless we think Will Campbell can be an immediate upgrade at left guard over Braxton Jones, which I don't get the feeling the Chicago Bears feel that way, Jeanty would be the cherry on top of a damn good offseason for a team that really was aggressive in going after their needs via trade, via free agency, to leave themselves open to just literally be able to take the best player available. And at that point, it would be Ashton Jeanty.
Mm-hmm. So, if you're going to take Will Campbell at number 10 with Ashton Jeanty still on board, you better have to have a solid conviction that he can be a left tackle at some point in a regular season, not somebody you can stash and hope that he can become a tackle or at least play guard, like a backup or like being a swing tackle. It really doesn't make sense for a Bears to draft Will Campbell and hope that he does turn out next year. But we're talking about somebody who is ready to contribute immediately at number 10. So obviously having a guy like Ashton Jeanty does make sense. If Ahmad Membo is still there, at number 10, let's say, Membo only, do you like him as a left tackle, or is he strictly like a right tackle, right guard type of player for you?
I think, again, his experience is at right tackle, so I feel most comfortable with him there. But if, Darnell Wright is locked in there, I think for the foreseeable future, I would roll the dice on him, because I think his film is just so good and he's a ridiculous athlete. I think when you have those two things, and the guy I'll point to as a Tampa guy is Tristan Wirfs, who played right tackle at Iowa exclusively and was an incredible athlete at his size.
Yeah.
They ended up getting him at 13. I think they traded up one spot to get him at 13 overall in that draft. But if you 2 years ago, they moved him to left tackle by necessity, and he's the first tackle in NFL history to be a first-team All-Pro as a right tackle and a left tackle now. So if you're telling me I have to bank on the fact that Membo's film is great and his athleticism is off the charts in his ability to transfer, obviously it's not that simple. And Tristan Wirfs to be the first person to tell you that transition is very challenging. But I'm comfortable making that gamble on a guy who has that kind of athleticism and that kind of tape in terms of his technique. That guy will probably figure it out real fast. And I think, again, he could go as high as 4 to the Patriots.
New England,
as a left tackle. And so if you're telling me I could get him at 10, I'll take my chances.
Mm-hmm. Another popular player that's kind of getting traction in the mock draft circle for the Bears is Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Do you see it that way, or do you feel like that's kind of somebody trying to inflate his stock a little bit too much?
No, I don't think so. I think, honestly, the Tyler Warren conversation starts at 5 with Jacksonville. And I think fact that they moved on from Evan Ingram and have kind of a hole there at tight end. And if you're talking about Liam Cohen coming in as the new head coach, as an innovative, creative offensive coordinator. You telling me he wouldn't want that guy to be able to design things for, and all the versatility that he brings to the table? Not just versatility as a pass catching weapon, but he's a legit blocker. I mean, he's massive. He can line up all over the place. You don't give away anything with your formations by having him out on the field like you would with Evan Ingram, who's clearly just a receiving guy. Tyler Warren is going to block his ass off. He's going to be able to do trick plays because of his ability to move around. He was a wildcat quarterback in short yardage and goal line situations for them. And so you can do so many different things with him. I think his conversation starts at 5. You could talk about him at 8 at 7 to the Jets, 8 Carolina, 9 for the Saints. I think everybody in that conversation. So you're talking about him at 10. He's similar to Ashton Genty for the Bears in that you're just taking a dynamic, high floor, high ceiling offensive weapon for Caleb Williams to help that offense. And so he's going to give you added help in protection because he can chip and get out. He can give you that max protect presence because he's huge, similar to what, again, I would never compare somebody like that to Rob Gronkowski, but one of the most underrated things about Gronk was that when you left him in to protect, he was basically another offensive tackle. He was a hell of a blocker. So I think Tyler Warren as just an offensive weapon for the Bears. If you're Ben Johnson and see how much value they got out of Sam Laporta in that offense, you're saying, if you address the offensive line, you address the defensive line with all those moves in free agency, especially if Genty's off the board at that point, you're telling me Caleb Williams wouldn't be thrilled to have Tyler Warren in that offense. And again, nothing against Cole Kmet, who's a younger player, as a solid guy. But I just feel like Warren as an athlete, as a versatile mismatch weapon, as a dynamic playmaker in the passing game, just would take that position to another level. And I think Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson would love that pick.
Mm-hmm. Another area of need for the Chicago Bears, I believe, is the edge rusher. They have Montez Sweat on one side, who was not as productive, obviously because of his injuries and the lack of pass rush. Austin Booker, I still think that they might be high on him, but you can never have enough pass rushers.
Right.
Among the names that are out there, Michael Williams, Nick Scourton, Mike Green, Jalen Walker, and of course James Pierce. And I know I'm missing somebody else's name at the top. Donovan Ezeraku as well. I know people think that Dennis Allen only likes bigger, massive guys on the defensive line or inside, like 6'5", 270, 280-ish type of guy. But of all the names that I just mentioned, who might not be, big or strong or like, barely just above 250s, which of the players do you think Dennis Allen would be like, yeah, I can work with this guy, even though he's not the biggest guy that I'm usually used to having in the past?
I think the guy, Mike Green is going to jump up to a certain extent just because he was so productive. He's so explosive. I think he'll be in that conversation. Ezeraku is the guy that I think would get most coaches excited because, again, he's productive.
Got a long arm, right? I think.
He's got a great wingspan, but again, the combine workout was incredible. I mean, the athleticism he showed off basically in every way. And when you match that, he's similar. He reminds me so much of Armand Membo as a prospect in general, because he's a guy that came in with a lot of production, a lot of great film. And you're like, even if he doesn't test, out of the building, I'm okay with that because that's not what I'm interested in. He's a polished technician with a great pass rush plan, so I can deal with that. And then he tested his ass off. And so you're like, okay, now I have to reconsider this. I have to put him in a different tier now because he's clearly an elite athlete and he's a polished technician and he does have that refined pass rush plan and he was highly productive. And so I think people are talking about Donovan Ezeraku as a top 20 pick now, whereas he was one of those guys that I think a lot of teams are like, maybe I can get him at the top of the second. I don't think that's going to happen. I know he ended up going kind of late in my mock. I think he went 28 or 29. To Detroit or Washington in this mock. I just don't think he gets down there, to be honest. Too many boxes are checked. He's too explosive. He's too athletic. He's too productive. And he's too polished. He's going to make an immediate impact at the next level. So, I mean, if you're a team picking down here, if you're a contender and you get your hands on that guy, you got to be pretty happy because he's going to make a big impact right away.
And then the other position for Chicago is the interior defensive line. I know people are kind of split on Grady Jarrett's signing. What did you think of Grady Jarrett signing as a somebody who's used to seeing him in Tampa twice a year? And then what player do you think that the Bears could get interior-wise that would fit the Dennis Allen system?
Yeah, I mean, Grady Jarrett, again, raising the floor of your roster. This is a guy that, again, he's not as explosive as he was in his first 5-6 seasons in the league. So you're not getting, what you're getting in him, but you're getting a leader, man. You're getting a guy who's highly productive. It's been in the league for a decade, who's going to raise the level of expectation in the defensive line room, in the locker room, on the sidelines. That's a guy who you want on your roster as a glue guy. He's just going to hold things together. Right. And so he's not going to prevent you from going out and spending a high pick on a defensive lineman, but he's the type of guy you want to spend. I think in the second round of this mock, I have Chicago getting Darius Alexander out of Toledo early in the second. I think they have
and you also have Nick Stout.
Yeah, so I mean, those two guys I think are perfect fits for Dennis Allen. But if I bring in a guy like Darius Alexander, I'm stoked that I have Grady Jarrett there to develop him, to help be a voice in his ear, to help show him the ropes because he's been so productive in the league. So I think that'd be great for them. If you're talking about in the second round. In the first round, I don't know if they go there that early, but this is such a great year for a team to need defensive line, whether it's edge or interior, and to have two really early second round picks, because I think that range is going to be so loaded with guys like, again, to get Scorton and to get Alexander at that range. It just speaks to the depth of the class at those positions. I mean, Walter Nolan at 32 to me is crazy. Derek Harmon barely sneaking into the first round is crazy. Kenneth Grant, I think, was at 28 to Baltimore. Yeah. It just, there's only 32 slots. So you end up getting to the bottom and you're like, man, these position groups are so deep that not everybody can go in the first round. And so for a team like Chicago, who needs interior help and needs another edge guy, to be sitting pretty with those two early seconds, somebody is going to fall to them at both of those positions. And I think they're going to be really happy with it.
I hate the idea of Walter Nolan going to Philadelphia.
I know. It's BS, right? I saw that and I was like, man, that's exactly what they would do. They would absolutely take him and just make him the new Milton Williams and just laugh at everybody.
Mm-hmm. Are you high on signing the Dayo Odeimbo? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, from the Colts. Obviously, I think this is more of a potential signing with, actually signing that's more on, hoping that his youth and that his size will be able to reach his potential under Dennis Allen. Certainly adding him was a decent signing, but not somebody you're like, okay, I want this guy to get 10 sacks immediately. That's not how it works. I understand it. But what do you think of his signing?
No, I thought it was a great signing, and I'll defer to my colleague Doug Farrar, who writes for us at Athlon Sports, who did a great piece on the quality free agents in this class that he was really excited about, and Dayo definitely made the list. And so if you look at his film breakdown, you'll see a lot of reasons why Bears fans should be excited about his addition. I definitely think he can be that guy. Obviously, you're hopeful that Austin Booker can take a step forward and be a starting caliber rusher, but you sign a guy like Odenigbo because if he doesn't, you're still solid there. You're still set there with a guy who's been productive, even in a rotational role. I think now that he's got a little bit more of a chance to shine, I think he's going to do that. He's got great technique. He's explosive off the ball. And again, go check out Doug's stuff on Athlon about him. Go search his name on the site and you'll find some great stuff. Bears fans should be really happy about that signing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that one. You have Travion Henderson going here. He's probably like the second or third running back that goes here.
Mm-hmm. I think I have Omarion Hampton at 20 to the Broncos, and I think that's it until Henderson.
Okay. So how deep is this running back class? And if the Bears, if God forbid I don't know if they would bypass Genty at 10, but if Genty is already gone, what running back do you see in the second or even third round? You're like, yeah, this guy would fit Ben Johnson's vision and his offense best.
I think that there's so much speed in this class, right? We had the fastest average 40-yard dash for a running back class in combine history this year. And I think that just speaks to how many explosive playmakers we've got. And so when you look at Ben Johnson's MO, right, you want a power guy like he had in David Montgomery. You want a speed guy like he had in Jahmyr Gibbs. And obviously you're not going to get any Jahmyr Gibbs in the second or third round of this draft. Those guys are very, very rare. you do have some speedsters, man. You got DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. You got Bashal Tootin out of Virginia Tech, who lit it up at the combine. Those two guys stand out if you want just pure explosiveness and speed. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, I'd probably put in that conversation as well. If you're looking for more, power, obviously Cam Scadaboo from Arizona State is a fun guy if you want just pure power and strength. Devin Neal from Kansas, I think, is one of the most underrated backs in this draft. Very well-rounded guy, can catch the ball out of the backfield. Highly, highly productive. He basically averaged 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns for 4 straight seasons at Kansas. And so a highly, highly productive guy. But yeah, I think the top tier of this class is very deep. You got Genty, who's clearly RB1. And then the next 4 guys, I would say Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Hampton from North Carolina, and the 2 Ohio State guys, Henderson and Judkins, are the top 5. Those guys are all very deep at the top. But that next tier is 10 or 12 deep of guys that are worthy of coming off the board on day 2. And they're probably not all going to. So if you're sitting at the top of the 4th, there are going to be some really talented running backs. RJ Harvey from UCF is going to be there in that range. Again, very, very deep class at the position. I think teams, if they're not convinced that they have to take a specific guy early, are going to be really happy with the depth that's available in the 3rd, 4th round.
A couple more minutes with Luke Easterling from Athlon Sports joining us tonight on the Double 18 Podcast live stream edition. Luke, let's kind of go through some quick lightning round questions. Who had the best offseason so far, in your opinion? Give me 3 teams who's had the best offseason.
Again, I really do. It's not just because of you, but I like what the Bears did. I really think attacking their biggest need before free agency even started, trading for those 2 veteran guards and saying, hey, we're not going to have this problem again. We're gonna make this work, and we're gonna set ourselves up again. Grady Jarrett was a great signing. Just making sure they do everything they can to make Ben Johnson worth every penny, and make sure Caleb Williams hits his ceiling. I think they did a really good job. I really like what the Commanders have done. I think Deebo Samuel is a perfect wide receiver 2 for that offense, with Terry McLaurin as the 1, and now you bring him in to be Cliff Kingsbury's kind of jack of all trades, can just line up everywhere and do all kinds of stuff and take advantage of the attention that teams have to pay, not just to McLaurin, but to Jaden Daniels' running ability. And so when you have defenses on skates like that, having to worry about RPOs and having to worry about the big play, having a guy like Deebo who can just be that fun weapon who can line up all over the place, and trading for Laramie Tunsil, I thought was a great move for a team that desperately needed to upgrade at the left tackle spot, and that really frees them up in free agency. And I'll be a homer and say that I love what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done, mostly by keeping their own players. I feel like every offseason we go through this, where the Bucs have a couple of really high-profile free agents that everybody in the league is like, yay, we're going to get Mike Evans, and yay, we're going to get Chris Godwin, we're going to sign Levante David. Or it never happens, guys. I'm sorry. Jason Light does not let his guys out of the building. If the Bucs want to keep somebody, they keep him. And that's what they did again this year. They got Chris Godwin for so much less than he could have gotten somewhere else. I think it was Ian Rappaport said he could have gotten $20+ million more over the life of his contract in New England, and he just wanted to stay in Tampa because he loves what they're building there. That's what we mean when we say team culture. When we have a franchise that takes care of their own players to the point where they just want to stay there and keep building. And again, bringing back Levante David for another year. But again, they also raised the floor. They kept Ben Bredesen on a 3-year deal to shore up the left guard. The Bucs have the entire starting offense coming back. Okay, this is an offense that was top 5 in both rushing and passing last year, and they're all coming back. And they've got guys who weren't technically full-time starters, like Rashad White and Bucky Irving in the backfield. Jalen McMillan, as was a rookie last year, he's coming back as their 3rd receiver. The whole tight end room is back. I mean, that team can go into this draft and just load up on defense and be a really, really dangerous team.
Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, a couple of teams who really need to have a great draft because they didn't do anything else in free agency. I can think of a couple of teams. Excuse me. Dallas is probably the number 1 team on that list.
Yep. I would say Dallas in terms of an inactivity standpoint, but the team that confused me the most is the Seattle Seahawks. They're the
Seahawks and then the Texans, actually.
Yeah, Texans are the same way. Like, both Houston and Seattle went into the offseason with very clear needs, like, hey, we need to address these things. And they thought the first step towards doing that was to create bigger needs elsewhere for some reason. Like, I don't understand. Like, Seattle, yes, you get a third-round pick, but Geno Smith, I don't know if anybody knows this, is a better player than Sam Darnold. So if you wanted to get worse at quarterback, getting younger only helps if the players are comparable. And I think Geno Smith is a way better quarterback in general than Sam Darnold has been everywhere else but Minnesota, where he had Kevin O'Connell. Yeah. He doesn't have Kevin O'Connell anymore. He doesn't have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson anymore. And so Seattle went into this offseason, we have to upgrade the offensive line. We have to put everything in upgrading the offensive line. We have a solid veteran quarterback. We got a hell of a backfield. We got great receivers. We got some solid pieces on defense, some really young, solid pieces on defense. We know what we need. And they trade away DK Metcalf. They trade away Geno Smith. They signed Sam Darnold. They signed Cooper Kupp, who's older and banged up. Cooper Kupp is older than Mike Evans. People don't understand this. Like, at this point in his career, if Cooper Kupp was still actually the Cooper Kupp we are used to, you think there's any chance in hell Sean McVay lets him out of the building? Of course not. So Seattle just, again, got older at receiver, younger but worse at quarterback, didn't really save any money because they gave Kupp a 3-year deal, and they still have to fix the offensive line. They still have all the problems they started with. Houston, very, very similar. And again, Dallas, I don't feel bad for Cowboys fans, but they just never do anything. So I don't know what they expect at this point. It's just, you expect that every offseason you're not going to do anything, and every regular season you're still not going to make the NFC Championship game because you haven't made it since I think I was 11 years old. So
that's right. Let's talk about a couple of big names that are still out there. Trey Hendrickson, obviously the Bengals are trying to keep him. Joe Burrow wants him. At least he got, team to force to, overpay for maybe T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, which was expected. Do you see Trey Hendrickson still signing with Cincinnati, or do you feel like, he's still going to be traded?
I mean, I don't trust the Bengals to re-sign him. They should, but I think that until they do, I'll believe that they'll find some way to tell Burrow, like, oh, well, we couldn't afford it because we paid your receivers and now we have to let him go. So I'll believe it when I see it. But if any team, especially a contender, can have him for, a second or something like that and be willing to pay him, he's still a dominant pass rusher and one of the best in the game. And those guys just don't grow on trees. So again, if they're able to get it done, good for them, because that's what they should do. But Bengals fans are jaded for a reason. So I'll believe it when I see it.
Aaron Rodgers, he visited Pittsburgh today. Is that where he's going, or do you feel like he's going to kind of still milk this as reports that his agent's telling him to take as much time as possible? Is that where do you think he's ultimately heading there?
I mean, it's like we talked about at the very top of the show. Like, there are only so many spots and so many aging veteran quarterbacks who are starting caliber-ish left. And so they got to match up at some point. And, again, Rodgers can take as much time as he wants, I guess. He's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Nobody can take that away from him. But at this point in his career, he's a mediocre quarterback. He can't really do a whole lot outside the pocket. He's still one of the greatest throwers of a football in the history of the game. But you're also bringing everything he brings to your locker room, all of that coming along with it has to be part of the equation. And so, if anybody's proven he can handle big personalities, it's obviously Mike Tomlin. And I don't think that really scares him off. I don't know how much that raises the ceiling of a team like Pittsburgh to bring in Aaron Rodgers. But again, you're sitting at, the 20s in the draft. You don't really have much of an improvement. Do you think that Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe in the second round or something, gives you a better chance? And again, signing Aaron Rodgers shouldn't preclude you from taking one of those guys, but anybody who still needs a quarterback and any quarterback who still needs a home in this process, they all have to realize, like, well, you'll have to do, and we'll just have to make do with it. And I think that's going to be the same for both sides of that.
Speaking of aging quarterback, where's Russell Wilson heading?
Feels like Cleveland, right? I think Cleveland ends up being the spot for him. Again, he's in that same area where at this, he's a Hall of Fame player in his prime. And at this point in his career is who he is. I think if he can take care of the football and remind himself that there are still throws that can be made shorter than 20 yards, I think that he can be effective within the right offense. And if he's the type of guy that if you told Myles Garrett, hey, don't worry, we're going to bring in Russ, we're going to raise the floor on that position, maybe we're going to spend an early pick on a quarterback, we're going to address that spot, that would make sense to me, because I think, again, Russell can be productive at this point in his career. He's got some pieces around him in that offense, and Judy and Joku. Interested to see what they do at the running back position, but there's some weapons to be had there, and I think that ends up being his best fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, Luke, thanks for your time tonight on this Friday night. Really appreciate you joining me. I know it's been a while since we last you, maybe close to 2 years ago, perhaps, but it's been fun talking with you about the NFL and the draft. Thank you so much for your time on this Friday. Make sure, if you're a football fan, please make sure to follow Luke on his X at Luke Easterling, one word, and he also writes for the Athlon Sports. That's athlonsports.com. Please say hello to Doug Farrar for me. I met him at the combine in Indianapolis 2 years ago. There was a party that was organized by Sports Management Worldwide, a company. There was a pre-draft party that I attended, so I met Doug Farrar there 2 years ago. Thank you for your time, Luke. Enjoy your weekend, and let's do this again very soon to kind of after the draft and see what the teams did and how you would grade them. Thanks for your time tonight.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Let's definitely not wait a couple years next time. All right.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, folks. Enjoy your weekend, and we look forward to having you on our next episode of the Double A Team Podcast Live Stream Edition.